Hi, we are super excited to kick off this new monthly live webinar series to bring to you the latest updates on Azure Database for MySQL directly from the product group and to open up a new channel of interaction with all of you who are working with our service. I'm Shreya Raitar. I'm a product manager in the Azure Database for MySQL team, and I'll be co-hosting this session along with Avnish Rastogi, who is also from the same team and comes with a rich databases experience, having worked with multiple databases platforms for a long time now. So, folks, welcome to the very first episode of the series. This is our first time doing this live series, so please bear with us in case of any hiccups or any technical glitches that we may face. And let's try to keep this session as interactive as possible. So, if you have any questions at all, or feedback, or even suggestions, just go ahead and post them in the chat window, and we'll address them as soon as possible as we go through the session. And also, we have our product expert and feature lead, Sudesh Narayan Swami, moderating the chat, who will also be helping us address your queries. Thanks again, Sudesh, for helping us out. So, Avnish, I know we have a lot of interesting topics planned for today. Can you tell us more on what we'll be covering?
Yeah, no, sure, you are absolutely right. So we have a lot of interesting topics to cover. And because this is our first monthly session, we will start with the overview of the flexible server delivered by Parik, who is our product lead for Azure MySQL and MariaDB. Then we will talk about retirement of our single server and how to migrate from single server to flexible server and switch to latest features updates from last 2 months and brief demo of each feature and finally, sneak preview in upcoming features we are planning in Q1 2023. Thanks, Sharia.
Awesome. So let's, Parik, we'd love to have you on right now. Welcome to the session. Thank you for joining us. Can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and what you're going to be talking to us about today?
Thanks, Shreya. Thanks for having me here. Kind of really excited to be here. As Avnish called out, I lead the product management team for Azure Database for MySQL and MariaDB service. I've been with Microsoft for more than 13 years now, changing various roles, but being always on the data side of the things. Since this is our first episode, my goal is to kind of take our viewers through the overview of Azure Database for MySQL service and share with them the top capabilities of flexible server service. So if you're okay, let's get started.
Yeah, that sounds great, Parik.
Perfect. All right. So as you might be aware, MySQL is the second most popular database in the industry, and it has been consistently been able to maintain its ranking for several years now. So what are the key reasons for MySQL to maintain its top ranking? First, its rich community and ecosystem support. It's a 27-year-old product, and as you can imagine by now, for it to maintain its top position, this is not possible without a strong community support and knowledge base available out there, and the features and capability which the team is kind of constantly innovating and providing on MySQL engine. Next, it's the best database engine for you to develop your web and mobile application, owing to its connection scaling capabilities as well as rich replication technology, which is why it is one of the best database engines out there for you to build your web and mobile application. Then lower total cost of ownership with no licensing fees. This is one of the reasons why many startups, SMBs, SMCs start their application journey or database journey with MySQL engine. Fourth, it's a key part of Linux ecosystem. If you've heard about LAMP stack, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and it's supported by all major cloud providers as a fully managed service, which tells you it's easily available and accessible, and that makes it a kind of a clear choice. And finally, it's reliable and proven tech. As you can see, some of the brands below in the slide, these are the brands who have built their business applications starting with MySQL. So this gives you a peace of mind when you start building your applications on MySQL. Now, let's talk about Azure Database for MySQL Service. Azure Database for MySQL Service is a fully managed service where we bring the Azure innovations to the community versions of MySQL. And let me give you some of the top reasons for you to consider Azure Database for MySQL Service when you're migrating your existing application, which is already using MySQL Service, MySQL Database Engine, or if you're building a new application on MySQL. First, MySQL is Azure Database for MySQL Service is cost effective. Like switching to Azure Database for MySQL Service, if you're running on an on-premises environment, that itself could give you around 48% reduction in total cost of ownership. And this is possible by leveraging some of the features which we have provided in our flexible server offering. First, you can start with your development on burstable compute. A burstable compute, the low end burstable compute starts with $6 per month. So it's kind of really easy and reduces the cost barrier for you to get started. And second, you are charged hourly, and when the server is not in use, you can stop the server and stop the billing right away. Third, leverage auto scaling of IOPS. So this is one of the new features which we have recently released, where you pay for the IOPS you consume on demand, as opposed to paying for the IOPS which is provisioned but may not be utilized. Fourth, you leverage the advisor recommendations for right sizing your compute. So the system will provide you, the service will provide you the recommendations if you are underutilized or overutilized, and if the compute is right sized. And accordingly, you can choose the right compute SKU and pay for what you use. And finally, if your workload is very predictable, we would recommend for you to use reserved instances. You can have a 1 year or a 3 year reserved instances, which can significantly save your cost up to 63%. So next, Azure Database for MySQL Service is easy to provision and scale. You can get started with a free Azure account. So you can get an Azure Database for MySQL Server for free for 12 months with 32 GB of storage. And getting started is as easy as like 5 minutes and 5 steps and 5 minutes. So you would log into your Azure portal, you will log in and set the subscription right. You will create a resource group. You will create Azure Database for MySQL Server, wait for 5 minutes, and then connect to the server and get started. And then scale up to the server as needed. So once you are in the development mode, but once you then graduate into testing and in production, you can go from burstable to general purpose to business critical SKU. You can scale up to 96 vCores, 672 GB of memory, 16 terabytes, and 48,000 IOPS. And further, if you want to scale out, you can scale out up to 10 read replicas. So depending upon once your server is in production and as your workloads demand changes and as your application starts to scale, you get more traffic on your website or your mobile application, you would start scaling out and continue to add read replicas. And all this happens by just firing a single command or pressing a single click on the portal or moving a slider. So it's very easy to scale with Azure Database for MySQL Service. Next, Azure Database for MySQL Service builds you all the capabilities for you to build resilient and responsive or fast mission critical applications. Flexible server offering provides you same zone and zone redundant high availability with 4 nines of SLA, which translates to around like 4 minutes and 23 seconds of downtime per month. Further, you can define your scheduled maintenance window. So every monthly, we would roll out some of the patches, bug fixes on the MySQL engine, underlying operating systems, as well as some of the functionality and the features which we provide in the form of sidecars running on your server. So these components are being patched every month, but you can define and control the downtime by defining what day of the week and time window, 1 hour time window, which works best for you. Fine. Then next, you would choose your business critical SKU for running your production application. Further, flexible server also provides you capability to co-locate your application and the database in the same zone. This can significantly reduce your application to database latency and allow you to build responsive, fast applications. Next, again, coming back to auto scaling of IOPS, and this is a key feature which we had kind of prioritize based on the data which we saw. Most of our customers struggle to understand what is the IOPS requirement of the workload. It's a really a hard problem, because you don't know one query, certain times where you have a high traffic period and it's unpredictable. And that's the reason you may not be able to get your IOPS sizing right. But auto scaling of IOPS up to 48,000 IOPS takes care of that, and it gives you a peace of mind. Once you turn it on, the IOPS are consumed on demand, and even if you have a high burst of traffic, it's absorbed, and your responsiveness of your application is not impacted if you have this capability turned on. And next, finally, if you're running a production application, Azure Database for MySQL has built-in monitoring and alerting in place. You can monitor your resource utilization. Yeah, you can also monitor your resource health and be alerted if there are changes in the workload pattern, so that you can react quickly to some of these changes. Next, with Azure Database for MySQL Service, you can tap into the entire power and ecosystem of Azure. You can build your application, you can deploy, you can manage, govern, and finally work with your data using some of the capabilities which Azure provides with an integrated Azure ecosystem. You start building your application, be it on Java, PHP, .NET, Node.js, back it up on Azure Database for MySQL Service. Your application could be hosted or running on or deployed on Azure App Service, container apps, Kubernetes services, and Power App integration is also coming soon based on the popular demand. Then you can manage your CI/CD pipeline using GitHub Actions or Azure Pipelines. You can manage your data through Data Factory and Data Studio, which again we recently released. And finally, you can work with your data and make real-time decisions using Synapse Analytics and Power BI. So again, this is the real power of running your open source database on a platform like Azure. And finally, you are building your application on the most trusted platform and the cloud provider you have in the industry right now. You have capability. Your data is encrypted at all times, at rest and in motion. And further, you can control who has access to your data. So the data which is encrypted, you can encrypt the data with using your own keys, and which you can then drop it in Azure Key Vault and manage your database access through that. Further, Azure Database for MySQL Service Flexible Server now also supports Azure Active Directory authentication, and you can leverage all the features and capability with Azure Active Directory authentication provides you, and that thereby centralizing your user management and allowing you to manage your password policies centrally. And finally, you will be hosting your data on a cloud provider with the highest number of the industry leading certification and the compliance out there. So that surely gives you a peace of mind when you are hosted on a service and a cloud provider which has those certifications, privacy policies, and compliances in place. And finally, I'm sharing the top industry use cases for running Azure Database for MySQL Server service. As you can see, and some of the customers who are running their mission critical application on Azure Database for MySQL Service. Hopefully, this gives you some confidence on putting your bets or putting your data on Azure Database for MySQL Service. And finally, some of you may have already know this if you're following us very closely, as well as if you're an existing single server customer. Single server will be retired by September 2024. It is already on the retirement path. And single server today already supports flexible servers today already supports all the features and capabilities of single server except two, private link and cross-region read replica. But the good news is it's coming soon to flexible server. And there is no reason for you to kind of hold back. And you should start planning your journey of migrating to flexible server. And if you're building a new application, you should start from flexible server itself. As you can see on the screen, while flexible server supports most features of single server, but in addition to that, you get access to the additional features which flexible server provides at no extra cost and at no additional cost. So again, would highly recommend for you to kind of start planning your migration journey from single server to flexible server. So again, you might be wondering, what options do I have to migrate from single server to flexible server? So we've released Azure Database for MySQL, Azure Database Data Migration Service integration, which allows you to migrate your MySQL server from single server to flexible server. DMS, as we call it, or Data Migration Service. It's an intuitive self-service way for you to migrate your MySQL server. And you can use it for external migrations, like if you're migrating from on-premises or external cloud, but you can also use this for migrating your single server to flexible server. And there are two modes of operation depending upon your database size, nature of the workload. You can opt in for online migrations or offline migrations. The difference between them, as the name suggests, is the downtime which you can afford. Offline migrations will be, your database will be offline during the migration, but it is also the fastest way for you to migrate. So generally what we recommend is, if your database size is lower, like when I say lower, it's like 100 GB or less, you may want to have an offline migration where you can migrate within few minutes, and it would happen really fast. And if you can afford to take application downtime, that would be the recommended method for you to move ahead. Online migration will ensure your database has the highest uptime, and your effective downtime might be few minutes, but the end-to-end time might be longer, because you would do the initial seeding of the data, and then the replication and all this, and finally when you're ready to cut over, you can cut over your connections and bring your server online on flexible server. And in addition to that, you can also continue to use community tools and the MySQL native replication technology. So we also have GitHub scripts for you to kind of self-serve in some of those. So we'll be sharing this resources for you guys for you to self-serve and perform the migrations by yourself. Okay, next, let me kind of take you through some of these capabilities which I talked about and help you get started on Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server Service. So I'm here into Azure portal. So let me refresh my my portal here, since it's been running for quite some time. So as you can see here, if you're creating a new Azure database for MySQL service, what I would do is I would come create a resource, create a database, and here I would click on Azure Database for MySQL service. So here, default, it will take you to flexible server. As you can see, the two capabilities which flexible server is not supporting, but coming soon, I would say, in private preview. So stay tuned. Are private link and cross-region read replica. If that's still what you're looking for, then you might want to use a single server. But for otherwise, if you can wait for these functionality, you should. We would highly recommend for you to start with flexible server. So I'll click create here. So here, some of the things for you to understand is the resource group, where you want your MySQL resource group. You can think of that as a resource container within Azure, and you would want to place some of the resources which are grouped together in the same resource container, which might be easy. For example, if I'm building a web application, I may want to have all the resources which I use for that web application in a single resource container. So I can use one of the resource container which I have, let's say Bakash. So this is the key component, like server name. I would make sure that I get the server name right. As of now, we don't have the feature for you to rename the server after it's created. So this is, I would say, you get this right the first time even if you're kind of creating a demo, if you're planning to graduate that demo server into a production server. Next, you would choose the Azure region, you would choose the MySQL version. This is some good, easy references for you. If you're using it for dev test, you want a low cost burstable SKU, which is good enough for development. So we have a starter template for you. But if you're thinking about a tier one business critical application, you may want to start with business critical workload. And further, this is where you would define like what is the SKU size you want, what is the compute size you would want, and you can go all the way up to 96 vCores and 672 GB as I called out. And further, this is the new feature which I was talking about, auto scaling of IOPS. So I would click on auto scaling of IOPS. Currently, it's an opt-in feature as it's in preview. So you would also let me also call out the features which are in public preview are kind of fully supported. The only difference being that you may want to be extra careful when you're running your production systems on that. But from a dev test perspective, from the product team perspective, they are code complete, they are fully tested, and they are kind of shipped after it's been tested and vetted out. But we want to make sure there are a few edge cases or few surprises which we may not be able to kind of cover it in our test coverage. Those things, that's why we generally keep a certain time period when we ship out the features in preview. So you may want to be mindful of running your servers in the production when the features are in public preview. So next, this is where you would choose your high availability option, whether you want a zone redundant or a same zone. Zone redundant is optimized for higher availability. It gives you 4 nines, and the standby server is on the secondary zone. But if you care more about performance and latency, and if that is top of mind for you, but you are okay with a slightly lower, or if you have more tolerance for some of the failure points which may happen rarely at the zone level, then you can choose same zone. Also, some of the regions, not all regions support multiple availability zones in Azure. For some of those regions, same zone is your best high availability option which we can provide. And then you can set up your backup retention and also configure geo-redundant backups for disaster recovery scenarios. And once you have those in place, once you have HA in place, let's say if I choose zone redundant, the next step is also, if you want to co-locate your application and database in the same availability zone for lower latency, this is what you would choose. You would choose what availability zone you want your primary to be hosted on, and consequently you would also choose where you want your standby to be located if you have a preference. If you don't have any preference, then again, no preference would work perfectly well there as well. And next is networking. You want to get these settings right. If for production use, you may want to use private access. You would click review and create once you have all the data filled in, and you would create the server. And once after your server is created, let me quickly take you to the tour. Once your server is created, you would come to the getting started page. The first thing is making sure if you use public access, by default, all your client access will be locked. In other words, you will have to open or add your IP addresses for the clients which you need access to the server. So, for example, my current laptop on which I'm running my demo, that may not have access to the server. And if I need access to the server, I will click here. I will save the setting, and once
Farid, just to be mindful of the time, I was wondering if we can have a little bit more of a look on the server parameters section, as well as on some stuff around monitoring. We did have a couple of questions coming in from the audience asking about, one, what are the differences in MySQL server parameter defaults between single and flexible, right? And two, how do we, how do we handle query insights and query performance insights and stuff like that with Azure Database for MySQL? Just like
let's take on that question, because I'm sure there are plenty of resources out there for people to learn. Server parameter defaults in flexible server will be different from single server. So what does this mean for you? The reason, let me give you first the rationale on why flexible server parameter are different. The underlying operating system where flexible server is running is Linux compared to Windows on single server. That changes some of the server parameters right away. And further, for us to optimize the server performance of flexible server, we have further added and optimized and tuned some of the server parameters. So first thing for you to know is the default server parameters may be different. Now, the GitHub script which we had shared allows you to extract the server parameters from your single server and kind of apply it on flexible server. That's the second part. If you want to do this right now, and how would I take care of my server parameters? The third thing is we are building the feature and capability for you to migrate along with your server parameters. So again, stay tuned on that. I mean, if that is something top of mind for you, that how would my workload characteristics change from migrating using DMS tool? You are right. As of now, server parameters are not migrated, but we have this on our radar. So I would just, but let us know and we can follow up if we have more questions on that. The
And
next, yeah.
yeah, there was a question on the query performance, query insights, and index recommendations. So I think that's
Yes.
something that you could probably show. Yeah.
Yes. So query performance inside, I unfortunately I don't have a demo, but we can do a follow up on that. The way we have implemented query performance inside for better performance and aligning with MySQL communities, first is you would turn on slow query log. So again, there is a feature, as you may be aware, MySQL server provides slow query log feature. So you can use server parameter or you can go to the logs here, and here you can turn on slow query logs. That's the first step. And then what you will do is you will save your slow query log in log analytics workspace, and then you will use workbooks. So we have some default workbook templates for you, and if you see here on the screen, there is a query performance insight workbook. Once your slow query log is turned on and the MySQL server starts logging those slower queries, and those queries which are performing longer than the default 10 seconds, but you can, again, using server parameters, you can tune. If you want to log queries which are taking longer than 1 second, it will only log those queries. And using this query performance insight workbook, you would be able to analyze and identify and get into the same functionality which was there in single server. So yeah, few extra clicks, but the same functionality and the intent which you have to quickly understand and analyze slow query logs are available out there. And we have a tutorial, so it will take one time learning curve for you to get started, but once you get a hang of it, you can easily use this and use Azure workbooks, and you can create your own workbooks as well. That's a flexibility you get with flexible server.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Parikh. And again, thanks for introducing us to all the cool parameters, as well as for about the single server deprecation. And for all of you in the audience, if you are new to MySQL flexible server, I would really urge that you try it out today. We have a free trial with Azure free account that you can use. So do try it out today and let us know our feedback. And for all of you who are already working on single server, do look at migrating to flexible server today. Thanks so much, Parikh, again for having you. I know there are a couple of more questions on the chat window, but we'll address them on the chat just to be mindful of the time. Thank you. So, Avnish, I think let's move on to the next section. We want to hear about all the latest feature updates and announcements that we released in the last 2 months. And yeah, we'd love to see some demos as well with it.
And thank you, Parik, and thank you, Sharia. So we'll talk about some of the new features we released in last quarter. So we will start with auto-scale IOPS. So when you provision Azure Database for MySQL flexible server, it comes with pre-provisioned IOPS based on the storage allocation. And if your application requires more IOPS, you have to do manual intervention to scale IOPS up or down based on the application performance requirement. Now with auto scale IOPS, you can switch it to that option, and you no longer have to do manual intervention. Your application will scale up the IOPS and scale down the IOPS based on the application performance requirements. So So this is the overview page of the Azure database for MySQL. And here in the compute and storage, you can see that by default, it's pre-provisioned IOPS. And in this case, we have 492 IOPS. You can switch it to auto scale IOPS and save the settings. Once settings is saved, then you click on go to resource. And here you can see that, and you can see the cost, and you can monitor the cost of your MySQL flexible server. And we also introduced new metric IO count, which you can use to see how your IOPS are trending over the last hours or last few days. It will give you perspective on how your application performance requirements are changing over the time.
That's awesome.
Any
Uh,
questions, Sharia?
we don't have any questions right now. I think we can move on to the next one for sure.
Just 1 second.
Um, Let me know if there's a trouble sharing your screen, Avnish.
Yeah, my screen is sharing. I'm not able to move the slide.
Oh, okay.
Just 1 second.
Can you go out of screen share and share from the next slide? I think that will be
Yeah.
easier. Awesome.
Okay. So the next feature we will talk about is Azure Active Directory authentication. So Azure MySQL support both database authentication, and recently we released Azure Active Directory integration. It's in GA now. So you can use both MySQL native authentication as well as Azure Active Directory authentication to manage your database security. And in order to use the Azure Active Directory authentication, first thing is to create the managed identity. We support only user managed identity today, and it's you define this identity. Once it's created, you click on the go to resource, and in the settings on the security side, you have the authentication, where by default it's MySQL authentication. You can switch it to Azure Active Directory, and you specify the identity you created in previous section. You add, and then you assign the admin account which you want to use to manage the authentication. So that's pretty much to leverage Azure Active Directory authentication. It's fairly intuitive and simple to use, and you can use all your user group policy, password management, and everything through Active Directory.
That is awesome. And I think it's nice to have two new ways, another way of authenticating to MySQL. Or actually, if you use both MySQL native and as well as AAD, that's just a double protection right there. So I hope that answers your question, Yahor, as well as to how to enable AD authentication. Moving on to the next one.
Yeah, so
Amish?
next we will talk about data encryption with custom managed keys. So as Parik mentioned in his session, in his um, by default, all your data, logs, and backups are encrypted using system managed keys. Now with the GA of CMK, you can encrypt your data encryption keys as well. And It requires certain prerequisites. First thing is to make sure that you have the managed identity. Then you would also need the keys in your key vault, which you will use to encrypt your data keys. You can create the new key or you can leverage the existing keys, and you assign certain policies. So for this, you would need get, list, unwrap, and wrap key permissions. And then you assign those permissions to the managed identity. And once these settings are in place, you come to your Azure database for MySQL. And here in the data encryption, you select the identity you have created. And then the change and switch to the key you want to use to encrypt your data encryption key for your data encryption. And that will allow you to have the double protection. Your data will continue to be encrypted by the system managed keys, and your data encryption key will be encrypted using this custom managed keys.
Sorry, I remember the feature owner saying, this is almost like Inception, where you have encryption within encryption. So lovely to see that feature, Avnish. Shall we move on to the next? I don't see any questions as of now
Yeah.
on the chat window. Yeah.
So next we will talk about MySQL extension for Azure Data Studio. So Azure Data Studio is the operating system agnostic database management tool. We support different operating system, including Linux, Mac OS, as well as Windows. And you can use Azure Data Studio to manage all the different database platforms, SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL. And recently we announced the public preview of the MySQL extension for Azure Database Studio. And in Azure Data Studio, you can not only manage the database, write queries, create databases, and so forth. We also have the feature for Notebook, which you can use for data visualization as well as for the data science projects. So this is the Azure Data Studio, and you can install the MySQL extension. It will take literally a few seconds to install the MySQL extension. And once you have this installed, then you can specify the connection to connect your database. And you can use Azure Data Studio to connect to Azure MySQL as well as on-premise MySQL instances. So it's the same tool you can use to manage both on-premise as well as cloud resources. So now you can see different databases you have in your database. You can do the query, you can do the new notebook. You can look into your databases, what are the different tables you have, the utilization. So in this case, we have the customer table, and you can do select query, select count star. So it's very intuitive, and as I said, that you can install it on different operating systems. So and you can leverage existing sample codes, create databases, create tables.
Yeah, and I love the whole notebook experience that it provides. You can actually export the notebooks, do visualization and all of that, and as well. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And you can connect to your Azure MySQL instances as well from here. You can also connect to Azure portal. So now we are connecting to Azure, and we can see all the different MySQL instances we have from the same tool. So you can leverage this tool to manage Azure as well as on-premise.
Awesome. And Yahor, I do see that you are asking, please add support for Azure Radio authentication. Trust me, that's on in the works, and it will be there in a couple of months when we go GA. I don't see any other questions on Azure Data Studio. We can move on to the next one now.
Yeah, so next we will talk about read replica for high availability enabled servers. So as Parik mentioned that in Azure Database for MySQL, we support same zone HA as well as zone redundant high availability. And with this new feature read replica in same region, you can provision read replica on HA server, and you can use the read replica to scale out your read-only workload within the same region. And creating the read replica is fairly straightforward. So you have the high availability overview here. We have the zone redundant. Primary zone is zone 3 and standby zone 1. To create the read replica, we come to the add read replica. It will have all the properties from your primary instance. All you have to do is specify the read replica name and create. So creation will take some time, but once you have the read replica provision, you can come into the replication window again, and you can see your read replica has been provisioned successfully. So you can, it will have its own endpoint, so you can use that endpoint to connect your read replica.
Awesome. No questions again, Avnish.
Yeah, so let me go to the next feature we're going to discuss.
Yeah, this is the last one, I think, that we have before we move on to the upcoming features section. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, somehow this is not working. Okay. So last feature we're going to discuss is the in-place major version upgrade from 5.7 to 8.x. So a couple of things to remember. The database downtime for the upgrade will depend on the size of the database and number of tables in the database. Second, if you have read replica on your flexible server instance, you have to upgrade your read replica first before you upgrade your primary instance. So upgrading the single to from 5.7 to 8.x is fairly straightforward. It's single click experience. You click on upgrade, select the version, and click on upgrade. And it will do the in-place upgrade. And as I mentioned, the downtime will depend on the size of the database instance and number of tables in your database or in your instance. So now you have your MySQL flexible server upgraded to 8.x. Another thing I want to mention about the upgrade is that it's not a reversible operation. So once you upgrade to 8.x, you cannot roll back to 5.7. So any questions, Sharia?
None at this point for any of these feature updates. Would love to see the upcoming features, and I know there's a bit of excitement there, especially on features like, yep, GeoPaired, that's cross-region read
Yeah, so
replicas.
we are planning to announce several new features in upcoming quarters. We'll start with Power Platform and Logic Apps connector. Um, so Power Platform you can use to do the zero code, no code application development. It really empowers your business users who can develop their own cloud native application with almost zero code or no code at all. Then you also have the integration with Logic Apps for any kind of a workflow application. We plan to have this feature in Q1 2023. The second feature we are targeting is the data out replication. So if you want to replicate data from Azure to external MySQL instances, whether these instances are on-premise or other cloud providers, and we have seen a couple of use cases when it comes to data out replication. One is the disaster recovery. If you want to use your on-premise data center or other cloud providers as the DR, you can replicate your MySQL instance from Azure to your external MySQL instances. And second is the BI or analytics. If you want to keep your external MySQL instances in sync, you can set up the replication using this data out replication. The third feature we are targeting is the data in replication. So data in replication is when you are replicating from external MySQL instances to Azure. So feature we are introducing is to support data in replication on HA servers. And that HA could be same zone or zone redundant. The fourth feature we are targeting is the cross-region read replica. So I briefly mentioned about the in-region read replica. Now with this feature, you can configure read replica in the paired regions. So as you know that Azure has each region has a designated paired region. With this feature, you can create or provision read replica in the paired region. And you can use the read replica not only to scale out your read-only workload in other regions, but also for the disaster recovery within Azure. And finally, private link. So today we support public access and VNet integration based deployment. And we plan to have private link in Q1 2023, which you can use to connect to application or resources which don't support VNet based deployment. So that's all I have, Sharia. Any questions?
None at this point. And I think that this upcoming feature slide really helps understand all the new features coming up, especially like private link, which will help us have both public and private access. Now,
Absolutely.
that's so team. That's all we had for today. I see a couple of comments on the slow query logs and the query performance insights. Good news for all of you. We do have a troubleshooting series that is planned to be released in the next couple of months, in which we will do a proper deep dive into all of these and give you a better insight into them. But that's all we had for today. To learn more, you can navigate to ak.ms MySQL resources, which is our new one-stop shop for all resources. It's still work in progress, so please bear with us while we figure the format and structure out. But do check out our documentation and blog site as well. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us on Ask Azure DB for MySQL at service.microsoft.com. And stay tuned for more updates and announcements by following us on social media and subscribing to our YouTube channel. So our handle on YouTube and Twitter is AzureDB MySQL. And yeah, just feel free to go ahead and tune in. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this session. Do join us every month at the second Wednesday of every month at 7:30 a.m. PST for more such updates. And we'll, in the upcoming sessions, dive deeper into a few of these topics. Thank you
And
all.
thank you all. Thank you very much. Bye.